Hello to all of you from Spain. This is Friday afternoon for me, 3:23 in the afternoon. I'm sitting in the living room of the apartment where we are in Avila. Let me show you just the view out the window here. We're up on the third floor, right next to the train station. We miss you guys, but we're also loving our time here in Avila. We're going to record a little short video of the kids, and Jocelyn and I later show you around the apartment, just to introduce you to what's happening with us over here. But this video is actually going to be a sermon, a presentation sort of thing on a couple of this week's lectionary texts. So, those two texts will be James 1 and Mark 7. So from James 1, starting in verse 17, he says, "Every generous act of giving, with every perfect gift, is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. In fulfillment of his own purpose, he gave us birth by the word of truth, so that we would become a kind of first fruits of his creatures. You must understand this, my beloved. Let everyone be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger, for your anger does not produce God's righteousness. Therefore, rid yourself of all sordidness and rank growth of wickedness, and welcome with meekness the implanted word that has the power to save your souls. Be doers of the word, and not merely hearers, who deceive themselves. For if any are hearers of the word and not doers, they're like those who look at themselves in a mirror. They look at themselves and, on going away, immediately forget what they look like. But those who look into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and persevere, being not hearers who forget, but doers who act, they will be blessed in their doing. If any think they are religious and do not bridle their tongues, but deceive their hearts, their religion is worthless. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to care for orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself unstained by the world." Now, Mark 7, one more passage. It says, "Now when the Pharisees and some of the scribes who had come from Jerusalem gathered around Jesus, they noticed that some of his disciples were eating with defiled hands, that is, without washing them. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they thoroughly wash their hands, thus observing the tradition of the elders. And they do not eat anything from the market unless they wash it. And there are also many other traditions that they observe, the washing of cups and pots and bronze kettles. So the Pharisees and the scribes asked him, 'Why do your disciples not live according to the tradition of the elders, but eat with defiled hands?' He said to them, 'Isaiah prophesied rightly about you hypocrites, as it is written, "This people honors me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching human precepts as doctrines. You abandon the commandment of God and hold to human tradition.' Then he called the crowd again and said to them, 'Listen to me, all of you, and understand. There is nothing outside a person that by going in can defile. But the things that come out are what defile. For it is from within, from the human heart, that evil intentions come: fornication, theft, murder, adultery, avarice, wickedness, deceit, licentiousness, envy, slander, pride, and folly. All these evil things come from within, and they defile a person.'" Let me step back from these texts for a second and talk about a show that I've seen recently. It's a new version of the old show, Lost in Space, complete with its own modernized, a bit more frightening version of that old cheesy-looking robot. And part of the story is that this robot is somehow deeply linked to the small boy, this 9 or 10-year-old boy on the show character. deeply connected to him. There's an episode where some group of raiders is attacking their ship, and everyone on the ship goes into defense mode. Sorry about the noise outside. We're right next to some busy streets. So on the spaceship, everyone's in defense mode against these raiders, and the boy, the 9 or 10-year-old boy, and another older character get locked into a small room, like a storage room or closet, for their protection. And the robot is standing sentinel outside the door in the hallway, guarding it. And when the boy hears the noise of the fight, the shooting outside his small room, he wants to get out. He starts banging his fist on the door from inside the room, shouting, "Let me out! I need to help! Open the door! Unlock the door!" And the robot, for the first time in the show, refuses to obey the kid. Up until this point, the robot has been doing everything the boy asks. But now it just stands there. And finally, the other character in the room with the boy says maybe the robot is responding not to what the boy is saying or shouting, or even to what the boy himself thinks he wants, but to what the boy really wants. In other words, deep down, the boy doesn't really want to leave the room. And since the robot is so deeply connected to the boy, it knows the boy's deepest desire. His true desire is to stay where he is. I heard another example of the sort of thing I'm thinking of recently about in relation to a film, an old 80s film called Stalker. In this film, there's a room, a special room. Whoever enters it gets whatever they desire. The catch, the trick, is that the room gives you not what you say you want, or even what you may think you want. It gives you your deepest, your truest desire. And when they first hear about this room, it sounds really enticing to the characters in the film. But then they become very apprehensive. What if I don't desire? What if I don't love what I think I love? They think to themselves. What if lurking down in the depths of my being is a desire for something else? Commenting on this part of the movie, a theologian named Jamie Smith writes, "The room reveals all. What you get is not what you think you wish for, but what you most deeply wish for." And then later on he says, "Not many people can confront the truth about themselves. If they did, they'd run a mile. They would take an immediate and profound dislike to the person in whose skin they had learned to sit quite tolerably all these years." End quote. What both of these examples, the robot and the room, what both of these examples point to is the way that it's possible for us to live sort of disjointed lives. Lives where the surface of ourselves, even the way that we think about ourselves, that it can be veiled, hidden, disconnected from our true selves. One of Smith's most well-known lines from that same book is, "You are what you love, and you may not love what you think." We also see this sort of thing on display in different ways in the two passages that we've just read, from James and then from the Gospel of Mark. Two different ways of being disjointed. In James, you have this straight up, run-of-the-mill hypocrisy, basically. Christians who have heard and know their calling to follow and imitate and participate in the ongoing life and love and work of Christ in the world. But as much as they know this, as much as they are reminded of who they are when they come together, they forget their own faces. They forget their identity, their real calling, as soon as they walk away. As soon as they meet a stranger or a widow or an orphan or an enemy. As soon as someone gets in their way, it's revealed that what they really love is themselves. What they really care about is getting what they want, no matter the cost to others. The other passage is similar, the passage from Mark, but it's not quite the same thing. The Pharisees, who care most about the appearances of cleanliness, to the point that they value this appearance more than the well-being of the people they're supposed to be shepherding, serving, and caring for, This is a disjointed life, but it's not quite the same sort of hypocrisy that you find James talking about in his letter. Here we've got people who have not only heard the word, but people who believe they're following it to the letter. And this latter point is important. We like to think of the Pharisees as sort of the bad guys, the villains, the antagonists of the gospel. You've got the side of the good, and then you've got these villains. And we also like to think of villains as others, and as easy to recognize. In fact, that's one of the most convenient things about bad guys as a category, as a group. They're easy to spot. They even wear the same clothes. They're always dressed in black. It's easy to think of the Pharisees along these lines, sort of cackling maliciously and tapping their fingertips together in dark rooms as they plot a conspiracy. But our way of casting them in this way is actually a sign of something we might not want to admit, that a sign of our similarity to them. For the most part, they're not malicious. They've just done what we all are prone to do. None of us likes to think of ourselves as the bad guy, and so we cast ourselves as the good, as the untainted, unstained heroes of the story. This is what the Pharisees are doing. We are always the good. Everyone else is always the bad. And there's no mixture or gray area in between. Let me explain a bit more what I mean by this. None of us, myself most of all, really wants to take James' advice from that passage. It would require way too much of me to actually follow what James is saying. Sacrifice my time, my energy, my resources, offer myself up to all these other people around me, put their needs before my own. I don't want to do that. What I want to do is avoid James's advice as much as I can. But I don't want to admit that to myself, and I don't want others to think that about me. The truth then is that deep down, I would like to think of myself and about myself that what I've done is take to heart what James is saying and make sure others think that I've taken it to heart, but really to have avoided it. This would be the ideal. But this is also the heart of Pharisaism. They have convinced themselves that they are truly good by focusing on and enforcing obsessively these rules about purity, about washing and observing cleanliness laws. And since they're avid rule followers, it's become easy for them to blind themselves to the fact that they've forgotten and ignored and trampled on the truly important thing, caring for and taking care of the people around them. They've hidden from themselves the truth that what they should fear and fight the most is not unclean hands, but unclean and corrupt and apathetic hearts. What truly defiles our humanity is not this surface level stuff that they've become obsessed with, but the twisting of our desires and loves inward toward ourselves and over others. And I think if we take a good long look at our own minds and our own hearts, we might see that this is something that all of us are drawn to, all of us are inclined to. If I could live a prideful and egocentric life, puff myself up and value my own wants and desires and wishes ahead of everybody else's, and if I could do this all the while convincing myself and everyone else that I'm really virtuous and good and pure, that would be the good life, right? And so this is why we need to come together. This is why we need to hear these letters, these stories. This is why we sing these songs and share this meal together. And a meal that we're sharing in, even though we're on the other side of the globe from each other. We share in Christ's table with you. And we hear James's words, which stitch our disjointed parts back together. His words which put a mirror back in front of our faces to remind us again and again of our true selves, to remind us that our true calling is to love as Christ has loved us, to care not just about the surface level, but about the direction of our hearts, what it is that we love the most. Let me close with that one small chunk from that passage from James again. Let everyone be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger, for your anger does not produce God's righteousness. Therefore rid yourselves of all sordidness and rank growth of wickedness, and welcome with meekness the implanted word that has the power to save your souls. But be doers of the word, and not merely hearers who deceive themselves. Amen. We miss you guys. We love you all. We're praying for you. And we will talk to you again soon.